The forest was so quiet that morning you could hear the soft drip of dew rolling off pine needles. A thin mist crawled between the trees like a shy ghost, wrapping the woods in a calm silence. I was sipping hot cocoa inside my fishing cabin, my quiet place, my little escape, when the knock came, hard, sharp, angry. Before I could even set the mug down, a man in a county jacket pushed open the door and stepped inside. His eyes scanned my cabin fast, my wooden walls, my hand-built shelves, the fishing rods mounted neatly over the window. Then he shook his head in disbelief. "Sir, I don't understand," the inspector said. "HOA Karen reported this as an illegal structure, but according to these documents," he paused, his eyebrows rising so high they nearly touched his hairline, "you own the entire forest." He lifted the papers again, checking one more time. Not just the lot, not just the cabin, the whole forest, all 320 acres. I didn't even get to answer before the inspector looked over his shoulder, right through the trees, toward the neighborhood far beyond the tree line, where HOA Karen lived. His face went pale. "Sir," he whispered, this is going to be a problem." Before I could ask what he meant, a scream echoed from deep in the woods. A woman's scream, sharp, angry, and getting closer. The inspector's face froze. And that's when everything went very, very wrong. Now let me tell you how it all began. 2 months earlier, the forest was my sanctuary. I bought the land years ago, long before the HOA neighborhood was even built. Back then, it was just a stretch of quiet woods with a small river running through it and wildlife that warmed my heart every time I visited. I grew up fishing with my grandpa, and when he passed, I made a promise to keep a place where peace could always be found. So I built a tiny cabin, nothing fancy, just wooden boards, a tin roof, a small deck that faced the river, and a rocking chair that creaked every time I sat down. I planted wildflowers around the cabin, carved a path down to the water, and hung a small sign by the door that said, "Be kind to nature and to each other." But not everyone liked the cabin, or rather, one person didn't. Her name was Janet, but everyone called her HOA Karen. She had the short haircut, the sunglasses bigger than her face, and the walk of someone who thought she owned the entire planet. The strange thing was, she didn't even live anywhere near my cabin. Her neighborhood sat all the way on the other side of the trees, separated from my forest by a fence, a ditch, and a long stretch of thick pines. But she did have one habit. She liked to walk her dog where she wasn't supposed to. Every morning she'd squeeze through a broken part of the fence, stroll into my forest like it was hers, and let her dog roam free. I didn't mind at first. The forest was big enough for all of us, but one morning something changed. She found my cabin. And from the moment she saw it, her face twisted like she'd bitten a lemon dipped in pepper. "What is this thing?" she snapped, marching straight toward me while I was chopping firewood. "This isn't allowed." "Ma'am," I said calmly, "this is my property." "No, it isn't," she shot back. "Nothing out here belongs to you. The HOA is responsible for all land within walking distance of the neighborhood." I almost laughed, almost. Instead, I said, "That's not how land works." But Karen didn't listen. Instead, she whipped out her phone and started snapping pictures of my cabin, the woods, my tools, everything. "Oh, this is illegal," she muttered. So illegal, I'll have this torn down before the week ends." "You don't have the authority to do that." "Watch me." From that moment, she made it her mission to destroy the illegal cabin. She filed complaints with the HOA. She wrote emails to the county. She left nasty notes on the fence. She even threatened to call the police for forest theft, which isn't even a real thing. But here's the thing about Karen. She never asked. She never listened. And she definitely never imagined that the quiet man she was messing with owned more land than her entire neighborhood combined. I tried to be patient. I tried to be kind. I didn't want trouble. In life, kindness can fix more problems than anger ever will. My grandpa taught me that. But kindness doesn't mean letting someone push you around. One day, I even baked her dog a treat and left it on the trail with a note. "I hope we can get along. The forest is big enough for both of us, your neighbor." But the next morning, the treat was smashed into the dirt, and the note had the word illegal scribbled all over it. Still, I stayed calm, because kindness isn't weakness. But then everything changed the day she returned with binoculars. Yes, binoculars. She stood at the fence, spying into the woods like a cartoon detective, following me step by step as I walked toward the river. Every move I made, she tracked. Every log I picked up, every fish I caught, every time I sat on my porch, she watched. I waved once. She didn't wave back. Instead, she pointed at me like she was identifying a criminal and shouted, "You're going down." I didn't even know what she meant until the county inspector showed up at my door 2 weeks later, the moment where Chapter 1 began. But back then, 2 months earlier, things were quiet, peaceful, until the day of the less extreme event that turned everything upside down. It started when I found footprints around the cabin, not animal prints, human ones, small ones, maybe from Karen, maybe from someone else. They circled the cabin, stopped by every window, and even went around to the back where my generator sat. Someone had been snooping, and they left something behind. A note, folded, pressed under a rock, a note that read, "You have 2 weeks to remove the cabin. This is your final warning." There was no name, but the handwriting. Oh, it was definitely Karen's. Big letters, uneven lines, and so much pressure on the paper that some letters nearly tore through. I sighed, placed the note on my shelf, and reminded myself, anger only makes rude people ruder. Another one of Grandpa's sayings. But the prints weren't the problem. That night, just after sunset, something far worse happened. It started with a loud crack, then a whooshing sound, then a bright light glowing outside my window. When I ran outside, I saw it. A massive tree near the path had been cut halfway through, not by nature, not by weather. By someone with an axe. Someone had tried to make it fall. And not just fall. Fall onto my cabin. I froze, my heart hammered in my chest. The cut was fresh, maybe minutes old. Sap still dripped from the wood. Someone had tried to crush my home. And in the dirt near the tree, half buried under leaves, was a small item someone must have dropped. A bright red whistle. The same one Karen carried when she walked her dog. The same one she used to blow at anyone who annoyed her. I picked it up slowly, the truth sinking in like ice under my skin. And before I could even process what I was seeing, a twig snapped behind me. Someone was there. Watching. Breathing. Closer than I realized. I turned and saw a shadow rush behind the trees. The forest went cold. The night went silent. And I knew Chapter 1 was ending on something far worse than a broken fence or angry notes. Someone wasn't just trying to report my cabin. Someone was trying to destroy it. And they were still out there. Watching. Waiting. So let me ask you this, where are you watching from? The shadow that slipped behind the trees stayed burned in my mind long after the night fell quiet again. I stood there, frozen beside the half-cut tree, clutching the red whistle like it was proof of a crime only I could see. The forest, usually my safe place, felt different now, like the trees were holding their breath, waiting for what would happen next. I wanted to believe it was Karen. I wanted to think maybe someone else had wandered too far or played a dumb prank. But deep down, the truth scratched at me like a thorn. Ever since she found my cabin, her anger had grown like a wildfire. Notes, spying, complaints. And now a tree cut halfway through, ready to fall and crush the cabin if I hadn't noticed in time. Still, I didn't want to jump to blame. Grandpa always said, kindness first, even when someone gives you a reason not to. So I took a breath, told myself I'd get answers in daylight, and went back into the cabin. But even inside, the air felt strange. I kept checking the windows. I kept listening for footsteps. I barely slept that night. The next morning, sunlight pushed through the curtains, warm and soft. For a moment, the world felt normal again. Birds chirped outside. The river whispered its usual song. I even made cocoa, hoping the simple routine would calm my mind. But when I stepped out to check on the damaged tree, something new caught my eye. Footprints, fresh ones, leading away from the tree and deeper into my forest. And they weren't mine. I followed them slowly, careful not to make noise. The prints weaved between tall pines, past the blueberry bushes, and curved toward the old stump my grandpa and I used to sit on when I was little. But the trail didn't stop there. It went farther, toward the direction of the neighborhood. And that's where I found something surprising. A little plastic bag hanging from a branch. Inside it was a dog biscuit. Karen's dog biscuit. She had dropped her whistle the night before, and now here was one of her dog treats hanging in a place no normal walker would pass by. It felt like someone was leaving a trail without meaning to, dropping clues like breadcrumbs. But then something odd happened, a less extreme moment that made me pause. I heard a dog barking. Loud, sad, almost scared. It echoed from the direction of the neighborhood, and for the first time since all of this began, I felt something unexpected. Worry. Karen's dog was a sweet old thing. She didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of all this drama. I wondered if maybe the dog had run off into the woods last night and Karen had chased after it. Maybe she wasn't trying to destroy my cabin. Maybe she was just panicked and acting wild. Sometimes people do mean things when they're scared. Maybe Grandpa was right. Maybe I needed to try kindness again. So I headed toward the fence line, ready to check if the dog was okay. When I got closer, the barking seemed louder, almost desperate. I followed the sound until I reached the break in the fence where Karen always squeezed through. And there she was. Not Karen. Her dog. Alone. Wrapped around a tree by its leash, shaking, tugging, trying to free itself. My heart dropped. I hurried over, kneeling beside the poor thing. "Hey girl," I whispered softly. "It's okay, I've got you." Her tail thumped weakly as I worked the leash loose. When she was free, she pressed her head against my leg, trembling. I checked her paws, they were muddy. Her collar was twisted. She must have been out here all night. When I gently scooped her into my arms, something fell from her collar. A folded note. My stomach tightened as I opened it. The handwriting was Karen, again. But this time, it wasn't angry. It wasn't rude. It was shaky. Scared. The note said, "Someone is in the woods, not you, someone else. They followed me, please help." The world seemed to spin for a moment as the truth slammed into me like a wave. Karen had been in the woods last night. She had seen someone else. Someone who wasn't me. Someone who had tried to cut down the tree. Someone who might still be out there. And Karen, loud, bossy, annoying Karen, was asking me for help. I didn't even have time to think. I tucked the note away, held her dog close, and hurried to the cabin. The dog stayed glued to my heels, whimpering softly as if trying to warn me of something. I reached my porch, heart racing, ready to go inside and grab my phone to call the sheriff. But before I stepped through the door, something made me stop. The door was open. Not wide. Just a crack. But I knew I had locked it. I always locked it. Especially after last night. Very slowly I stepped back, the hair on the back of my neck rising. The dog growled low, ears pinned back. The sunlight felt colder. The forest seemed to hold its breath again. And then I heard it. A sound from inside the cabin. A soft creak. A footstep. Someone was in my home. Someone was inside the cabin. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there. As I stood frozen on the porch, the door creaked open just a little more, as if someone inside was watching me through the gap. My heart slammed against my ribs. My forest. My cabin. My safe place. Someone had broken in. And just as the dog barked sharply, the door swung wider, revealing a dark figure standing in the shadows. The figure in the cabin froze for a heartbeat as my eyes met the shadow in the doorway. The dog barked furiously, teeth bared, growling low and warning the intruder that we weren't alone. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm, remembering Grandpa's words. "Fear can be a weapon if you let it control you. Use your mind first." "Who's there?" I called, voice firm but steady. The shadow moved suddenly, and I noticed a flash of something red in its hand. My stomach dropped. Could it be a weapon? I took a cautious step forward, but the dog growled again, snapping me back. "Wait, don't come closer," the figure yelled. The voice was frantic, almost trembling. I don't want to hurt anyone." Something clicked in my mind. This wasn't a random break-in. This wasn't a robber. The voice sounded familiar, panicked, scared. Could it be Karen? I inched closer, trying to see through the dim light. Slowly. The figure stepped into the sunbeams spilling through the window. My heart stopped. It was her. HOA Karen, flushed and wide-eyed, holding a small hatchet in her trembling hands. "Karen, what are you doing here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. I thought someone was following me, she stammered. Last night, in the woods, I saw a shadow. I thought it was someone trying to hurt me. I nodded slowly. It made sense. The half-cut tree, the footprints, the whispering fear in the forest. She had probably panicked, tried to protect herself, and now she had accidentally come into my cabin. Okay, I said carefully, put the hatchet down. Everything's going to be fine. No one's going to hurt you. Karen lowered the hatchet slowly, eyes darting around the cabin as if expecting an attack from the walls themselves. The dog barked and circled her legs, cautious but protective. I stepped closer, holding out my hands in peace. You're safe here, I said softly. No one's in the woods. And this cabin, it's mine. But that doesn't matter right now. Let's calm down and think. For a moment, Karen just stood there, shivering. Then tears welled up in her eyes. She dropped the hatchet completely, letting it clatter to the wooden floor. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I thought you were someone else. I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion. I get it. Fear makes people do crazy things, but threatening my cabin or the forest won't make it safer. If you see something scary, you should call for help, not try to handle it alone. Karen wiped her face with her sleeve and let out a shaky laugh. I guess I learned that the hard way. We sat down on the porch after a few minutes, letting the sunlight warm our tense nerves. The dog rested its head on my knee, finally calm. Karen stayed silent, watching the river glint in the morning sun, her hands trembling. I didn't know you owned all this, she said finally, voice quiet. I thought the forest belonged to the HOA. I thought I was protecting my neighborhood. I just didn't know. I smiled softly. Most people don't. Land ownership can be complicated, but owning it doesn't give me power over others. I built this cabin to enjoy the forest and share its peace, not to fight with neighbors. Karen nodded slowly, still processing everything. I guess I got carried away. I didn't think about how it felt for you. I should have asked before filing complaints. It's okay, I said. You're human, you made mistakes. What matters is that you learn from them. Kindness and empathy are stronger than anger and fear. That's something my grandpa always told me. For the next hour, we worked together to fix the tree near the cabin. Karen helped, holding tools, moving debris, and apologizing for her actions. Slowly, the tension melted into quiet conversation. She started to understand the effort it took to maintain the cabin and the land around it. And as we worked, I noticed something unexpected. Her fear wasn't just about the forest. It was about feeling powerless. Once she realized she had been wrong and someone was looking out for her, the anger and frustration began to fade. We ended the morning on an uneasy truce, agreeing to be more careful, to communicate better, and to respect boundaries. Karen returned home with her dog, and I watched them disappear into the neighborhood. I felt exhausted but relieved. The extreme fear and anger had passed, for now. I stepped back onto my porch and looked around the forest. The half-cut tree still loomed, a reminder of how fragile peace could be, but sunlight poured through the leaves, warming the forest floor. Life was continuing. The river flowed, the birds sang, and for the first time in weeks, I felt the forest as my sanctuary again. But just as I turned to go inside, I noticed a car parked near the edge of the trees. It wasn't Karen's car, and it wasn't the county inspector. Someone new had arrived. Watching, waiting, and in the backseat, a figure leaned forward, peering through binoculars. The forest had just grown dangerous again. The car sat at the edge of the forest like a dark silhouette against the green and gold of the morning sun. I froze on the porch, my coffee mug forgotten inside the cabin, heart hammering in my chest. The figure in the backseat was leaning forward, binoculars pressed against their face, scanning the trees. Whoever it was, they knew exactly where to look. They were watching me. My first thought was fear. My second thought was anger. And then I remembered Grandpa's words, observe first, act wisely. I stayed still, careful not to make any sudden movements. The dog, now calmer after the morning's chaos, growled low, ears perked. She felt it too, something was wrong. I considered my options. I could run inside and lock the doors, but that might attract attention. I could approach the car, but I had no idea who was inside. So I did the only thing that felt right. I grabbed my binoculars from the cabin shelf. I had always loved birdwatching in the forest, and my binoculars could see more than the naked eye. I lifted them and looked through the lenses. The figure was a man, middle-aged, wearing a dark hoodie that hid most of his face. He didn't move except for scanning the forest, Something about him didn't feel casual. His posture was deliberate, tense, like he had been waiting for days to see me. I put the binoculars down slowly, my mind racing. Who was he? What did he want? And most importantly, was this connected to Karen and the half-cut tree, or was it something entirely new? For a while, I just watched him. He stayed in the car, silent, patient, and then, without warning, he stepped out. The ground crunched beneath his boots. The dog barked fiercely, bristling, warning him off. I took a deep breath, trying to appear calm, though my stomach churned. He didn't wave, he didn't speak. He just started walking slowly toward the forest trail that led past my cabin. Panic rose. I ran inside, grabbed my phone, and called the sheriff. My hands shook as I dialed, trying to explain everything without sounding crazy. "There's a man in the forest," I said. "He's watching me, and he's coming closer to my cabin. I don't know who he is." The sheriff promised to send someone right away. "Stay inside, lock your doors, do not confront him," the voice instructed. I hung up and checked the cabin doors. Locked, windows, locked, everything secure, but my eyes kept darting to the trees. The man was still moving, methodical, heading closer to where I had fixed the half-cut tree earlier that morning. Then the dog barked again, louder this time, and I realized he had noticed something I hadn't. From the edge of the tree line, another shadow moved. Someone, or maybe more than one person, was approaching the car from the back. The first man didn't notice. I held my breath. The situation was worse than I thought. This wasn't just a single intruder. It looked like a coordinated effort. My mind raced through possibilities. Could this be someone targeting me because of the forest, the cabin, or was it revenge for Karen's earlier complaints? Time stretched. The minutes felt like hours as I watched from the window. The intruder near the car disappeared behind a thick oak. When he reappeared, he had something in his hands, long, metallic, and shiny. I couldn't tell exactly what it was, but it gleamed in the morning sunlight. I felt my stomach drop. Could it be a weapon, a tool for cutting down the trees, my cabin, my sanctuary? The dog barked again, low and warning, circling my legs. I picked her up, holding her close, whispering, "It's okay, we'll be safe, just stay calm." Then the first man reached the trail leading to my cabin. His movements were slow, deliberate, like he was testing the path for traps or cameras. I gritted my teeth. And then it happened. A loud crash from behind the cabin, a massive sound of breaking wood, splintering bark, and falling branches. My heart stopped. I dropped the binoculars. The second figure had struck. I ran to the window and looked outside. Part of the forest, near the river, had been cut or pushed over. Trees that had stood for decades were now leaning dangerously. One particularly massive pine had started to fall toward my cabin. I froze. The sunlight, which had felt warm and safe just minutes ago, now cast shadows of chaos across the forest floor. The dog squirmed in my arms, sensing the danger. My mind raced. I had to act fast. But how? I was outnumbered, outmatched, and the intruders didn't even know I had full rights to the land. If they had any idea I owned the forest, they might have hesitated. But right now, all I could do was survive. The first man moved closer. I saw the glint of metal. He had a long crowbar now. He was testing the cabin door, my sanctuary, the place where I had built peace, my home. And then a third sound joined the chaos, screaming. Not Karen's, not mine, something else, something wild. The forest had come alive with danger, and I realized, with a sinking feeling, that the next moments would change everything. The cabin shook slightly as the massive pine began to tip. One wrong move could crush it entirely. And before I could even decide what to do next, a loud, sharp whistle cut through the morning air. Someone else was in the forest, watching, waiting. And now the situation had turned extremely dangerous. The whistle echoed through the forest like a warning bell. The dog trembled in my arms, her fur bristling, as if she could sense the danger before I did. I froze, listening. The intruders had stopped moving. The man with the crowbar paused mid-step. The other figure near the fallen tree still crouched in the shadows. Something had changed. I looked out the window, straining to see where the sound had come from. At first, I saw nothing. Then, through the trees, a figure appeared, a man in a forest ranger uniform, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with confidence, his eyes scanning the chaos. He lifted a hand, signaling toward the intruders. "Stay inside," he called in a firm voice that carried through the trees. My heart raced. Help had arrived, but I wasn't sure if the intruders would listen. The dog barked, low and urgent, urging me to act. I hugged her closer, feeling her panic. The forest, which had been my sanctuary, now felt like a battlefield. The first intruder froze, glancing toward the ranger. The crowbar wavered in his hands. The second figure by the fallen tree ducked behind a thick oak, trying to hide. The ranger's presence seemed to shift the energy in the forest. Suddenly, the intruders didn't feel as confident. I realized then that maybe the whistle hadn't just been a warning. Maybe someone had known exactly when to call for backup, and that thought gave me a flicker of hope. The ranger moved cautiously, keeping his distance. "Who's responsible for this forest?" he called, voice steady. "Step forward now." The intruders hesitated. The man with the crowbar muttered something under his breath, then dropped the tool to the ground. The second figure raised his hands and stepped out from behind the tree. I took a deep breath and stepped toward the door. The ranger's eyes widened slightly when he saw me holding the dog. You own this land?" he asked, incredulous. "Yes," I said firmly. "It's all mine. The cabin, the forest, everything." The ranger's jaw dropped. "You all of this, it's yours." "Yes," I repeated. "And these men, don't have any right to be here. They were trying to destroy the cabin and the trees." He nodded slowly, processing the information. Then he reached for his radio. "I need backup at my location. 2 intruders here, armed, trespassing on private property." I felt the tension in the forest ease slightly as he called for reinforcements. The intruders looked uncertain now. Their confidence had faded. They were trapped between the law and the forest they had tried to invade. The dog barked again, low and warning, as the first intruder muttered something about getting out. He turned and ran toward the edge of the forest, but the ranger's voice carried through the trees. "Stop, you're surrounded." The second intruder hesitated, then slowly raised his hands higher. I didn't mean any real damage," he stammered. "We were just testing if someone was home." The ranger didn't move. "Testing? You cut down a tree halfway to crushing the cabin. You tried to break in. This isn't a test. This is trespassing and destruction of private property." As the men were secured, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. My cabin, my forest, my sanctuary, it had survived. The sun filtered through the trees again, casting warm golden light over the chaos that had just unfolded. But the adrenaline didn't fade completely. I realized how close we had come to disaster. The massive pine, partially cut, still leaned precariously near the cabin. One wrong move, one delayed action, and everything could have been lost. The ranger motioned for me to follow him outside the cabin. "We need to check the perimeter," he said. "Make sure no one else is here and that the property is secure." I nodded, gripping the dog tightly as we moved. We walked through the forest, past the fallen tree, past the footprints that had marked the intruder's path. I noticed small things I hadn't before: the crushed wildflowers near the cabin, the disturbed undergrowth where someone had tried to hide tools, the broken branch that might have been used to climb the cabin deck. It was sobering. I realized how much the forest meant to me, how much peace it had given me over the years, and how easily it could have been destroyed by someone else's carelessness or malice. As we walked, the ranger spoke quietly. "You've done a remarkable job maintaining this land," he said. "Most people wouldn't even realize the value of owning a forest like this, but you've protected it, and your quick thinking helped prevent serious damage." I felt a small sense of pride mixed with lingering fear. I love this place," I admitted. "It's more than a property. It's a memory, a promise to my grandfather, and a place for peace. I didn't want anyone to destroy that." The ranger nodded. "It's clear, and you acted wisely today, but you'll need to be vigilant. There are always people who will underestimate the power of someone who owns what they think they can control." We finished the perimeter check, ensuring the intruders were gone and the forest was safe, for now. The dog, finally calm, wagged her tail and sniffed around, as if approving the peace that had returned. When I returned to the cabin, I sat on the porch, exhausted but relieved. The sun was higher in the sky, warming the wooden boards, making the forest glow with life again. I felt grateful that no one had been hurt and that the cabin had survived. But even in that warmth, I couldn't shake a sense of unease. The intruders had come with intent. They had watched, they had planned, and there was no telling if this was over. As I sat there, I noticed movement at the edge of the forest once more. A figure crouched, hidden, observing the cabin, the dog, me. The forest had calmed, but the eyes watching from the shadows told me one thing: the danger wasn't gone. And then I heard a faint whistle again, sharp, deliberate warning. Someone was still out there. The whistle cut through the air again, sharper this time, and I froze, my pulse jumping. It wasn't like the ranger's earlier arrival. It was faster, urgent, like a signal meant only for someone who knew exactly what to do. I glanced around the cabin and saw the dog bristle once more, ears pointed straight toward the tree line. Her growl was low, almost warning me to listen carefully. I grabbed my binoculars again, careful to move slowly. Through the dense pines, I spotted a figure moving quickly, weaving between the trees, staying low. Whoever it was skilled, someone who had done this before. My heart hammered. The ranger had cleared the previous intruders, but now this was different. This wasn't a clumsy break-in. This was deliberate. I stepped back from the window and called the ranger on my phone. "It's happening again," I whispered urgently. "Someone's back, and they're fast. You need to come now." The line crackled. "Stay calm, where exactly?" I gave him the coordinates of my cabin and the edge of the forest. "They're moving through the trees near the river. They're fast, careful, and they know the layout," I said. He replied, "I'm on my way. Don't confront them. Keep the dog inside and stay alert." I hung up and moved the dog into the cabin, locking the door behind us. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to focus. The whistle sounded again, closer this time. I realized it wasn't coming from one person. Someone was coordinating from the shadows, getting the intruder through the forest. I peeked through the blinds. The figure paused, crouching near a small clearing. He reached down and picked something up, my fishing gear. My heart dropped. He had no intention of just trespassing. He was looking for tools, equipment, maybe even valuables. I knew I had to think quickly. I remembered the half-cut tree near the river. It wasn't fully stabilized yet. If moved carefully, it could serve as a barricade or distraction. I grabbed a flashlight, my mind racing, considering my options. The intruder lifted the gear and started walking toward the cabin trail. The whistle sounded again, louder this time. It was almost taunting. I realized someone was watching from the higher ground near the hill behind the cabin. Someone was orchestrating this whole thing. Suddenly, a rustle came from the left side of the cabin. My stomach dropped. Another shadow moved. I didn't know how many people were out there now. 2, 3, Maury. The dog barked furiously, straining against her leash, warning me that danger was imminent. The intruder on the trail paused and looked around, confused, then started running. I knew it was time to act. I pushed open the door slightly and shouted, "Stop! The forest is private. You have no right to be here." The figure froze, then threw the fishing gear down and sprinted into the trees. I chased briefly, but the dense undergrowth and roots slowed me. The intruder disappeared into the forest, leaving only the sound of snapping branches behind. I returned to the cabin, heart racing. The dog jumped into my lap, panting. I felt a mixture of relief and frustration. They were gone for now, but the person coordinating them was still out there. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. Someone had watched this forest for a long time. I decided to check the half-cut tree near the river. As I approached, I noticed something shiny among the roots, another whistle. Red, just like the one Karen had dropped weeks ago. My pulse quickened. This wasn't random. Someone had intentionally left it there. A warning, a signal, or a trap. I examined it carefully. It wasn't broken, just slightly scuffed. Whoever left it had been here recently. I felt anger rise, mixed with fear. How long had someone been watching this forest without my knowledge? How much had they seen? I returned to the cabin and reinforced the windows and doors. My mind raced. Every decision from now on had to be cautious. The forest I loved, my sanctuary, had become a place of danger. I realized that despite owning it, there were forces beyond me that could invade it if I wasn't prepared. Hours passed, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The sun moved lower in the sky, casting long shadows through the trees. Every rustle, every snap of a branch made me tense. I stayed near the cabin, flashlight in hand, dog at my side, eyes scanning constantly. Then just as the evening sky turned orange, the ranger arrived. His vehicle rumbled through the forest trail, tires crunching on the dirt path. Relief washed over me. He stepped out, alert and serious, scanning the area. "We caught some intruders earlier, but now you've got a different situation," he said grimly. "Someone is coordinating this. You're not safe until we figure out who." I nodded, exhausted. The forest that had once been a peaceful sanctuary was now a chessboard of threats, with unseen players moving through the shadows. And then it happened, a sound that made my blood run cold. A loud crash, louder than the first, came from the cabin deck. Someone had thrown something heavy. I ran to the window and my eyes widened. A tree branch, massive and sharp, had been hurled onto the deck. It splintered the wood near the door. Whoever had done it was bold, deliberate, and closer than I thought. The dog barked frantically, circling my feet. The ranger drew his weapon and moved toward the sound. I held my breath, realizing that the next move would decide everything. The forest wasn't just dangerous anymore, it was a battlefield. And whoever was orchestrating this was still watching, still waiting, and still deciding their next move. The crash echoed through the forest like a gunshot. My heart hammered in my chest, and the dog growled, pressing herself close to me. I barely had time to think before the ranger shouted, "Stay inside, don't go near the door." I backed away, gripping the dog tightly. The branch on the deck was huge, one false step, and it could have shattered the door or worse, hit me. Whoever had done this was bold. They weren't afraid anymore. They were testing boundaries, probing for weakness. I peeked through the blinds cautiously. Shadows moved near the edge of the forest, low and deliberate. I could see the glint of something metallic in one of their hands, a crowbar again, maybe a knife. The sun was dipping lower, and the long shadows made everything look more ominous. The ranger moved quickly toward the edge of the trees, shouting into his radio. "I need backup. Now, these intruders are organized and armed. We're dealing with a coordinated attack." I sank to the floor, heart racing. This wasn't just trespassing anymore. This was targeted. Someone wanted to intimidate me, maybe even harm me. The forest I had loved for years, the place of calm, of memory, of promise, had turned into a trap. Then I saw it, movement from behind the hill near the river. A figure was crouched, almost invisible in the shadows. He raised something long and metallic, a rope, a pole. My mind raced. I couldn't see clearly, but I knew his intention wasn't good. I hugged the dog close, whispering to calm her and myself. "We'll be okay, we'll be safe," I said, though I wasn't sure if I believed it. Suddenly, a whistle cut through the air again, sharp, precise, deliberate. It was the same sound I had heard before. Someone out there was signaling, coordinating the intruders. Whoever it was knew this forest, knew my cabin, and knew exactly what to do to scare me. The ranger shouted again, moving closer to the first intruder. "Drop your weapons, step away from the cabin." But the intruder didn't move. He raised the metallic object, preparing to throw it toward the cabin. My heart leapt. The dog barked furiously, straining against my grip, warning me, warning the intruder. In that moment, I realized I had to act. I ran toward the window, just far enough to be seen, holding up my hands. "Stop! You don't know who owns this forest," I shouted. The intruder hesitated, the object wobbling in his hands. "What?" he muttered. "I own everything here," I yelled. "This cabin, these trees, this land. You have no right to touch anything." The ranger froze, eyes widening, and I saw it in the intruder's face, a flicker of hesitation. He hadn't expected this. He thought he was confronting a scared, defenseless person. Instead, he was facing the owner of the forest itself. The whistle sounded again, closer this time, and the intruder dropped the metal object, stepping back into the shadows. Another figure emerged from the trees, perhaps the one coordinating the attack, but at that moment, the intruder seemed unsure. I felt a surge of hope. Maybe I could turn this around. Maybe the knowledge of ownership could give me leverage. But I knew I couldn't take any chances. The intruders were still out there, and the whistle signaled that more moves were planned. The ranger stepped closer, lowering his weapon slightly. "Are you the owner?" he asked cautiously. "Yes," I said firmly, taking a deep breath. "Everything here is mine. The cabin, the forest, all of it. They have no rights, and they will be held accountable." The ranger nodded slowly, eyes scanning the forest. "That changes things. They won't know what to do when they realize they're trespassing on private property on this scale." I realized then how important it was that no one else knew about the ownership yet. Karen had caused trouble before, but now, a new group of intruders had no idea they were dealing with the actual owner. The element of surprise could save my cabin and my forest. I stepped back inside, keeping the dog close. The intruders retreated slightly, unsure of their next move. Shadows moved, disappearing into the dense trees. The forest seemed to calm, as if it were holding its breath. But even as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky orange and pink, I couldn't shake the sense that this was far from over. Whoever had orchestrated this attack wasn't giving up. They were patient, watching, waiting, and planning their next move. I realized that the forest wasn't just a place of peace anymore, it was a battlefield. and I had to be smart, strategic, and cautious to protect what I had built. The whistle sounded one final time before dusk fell completely, sharp and deliberate. Whoever was out there was still signaling, still watching. I hugged the dog tightly, feeling the weight of responsibility and danger pressing down. The sun disappeared behind the treetops, and the forest grew dark. Shadows stretched long, twisted by the fading light. The intruders had not left, they had only vanished temporarily, blending with the trees. And then, from somewhere deep in the forest, a loud crack echoed, not the small crash from earlier. This was bigger, heavier, deliberate. The ground shook slightly, and my heart skipped a beat. Something or someone was moving closer to the cabin. The ranger tensed, stepping closer to the edge of the trees. "They're coming back," he muttered grimly. And in that moment, I realized the danger had escalated beyond anything I had imagined. The intruders weren't just testing boundaries anymore. They were ready for something extreme, and the forest I loved was the stage. Night had fallen over the forest, thick and heavy, like a curtain of black velvet. The cabin was dimly lit from the inside, the glow of a single lamp casting long shadows across the wooden floor. The dog rested at my feet, ears twitching at every sound, the rustle of leaves, the snapping of twigs, the whisper of wind through the trees. I could feel the tension in the forest as sharply as I could feel my own heartbeat. The ranger had stayed close, his presence both comforting and necessary. He moved quietly around the cabin, checking the perimeter, flashlight sweeping through the darkness. "We need to stay alert," he whispered. "They're out there, waiting, watching, and they know this forest better than anyone else." I nodded, gripping my mug of coffee, trying to calm myself. My mind raced through the events of the day, the intruders, the half-cut tree, the whistles, the shadows in the forest. Whoever was orchestrating this attack wasn't random. They had a plan, and I had no idea what it was. Suddenly, the dog growled, low and warning, staring at the far edge of the clearing. I followed her gaze and saw a movement, a shadow slipping between the trees, careful and deliberate. The man from earlier, or someone new. My stomach twisted in fear. Then the whistle sounded again, sharp, deliberate, cutting through the night air. Whoever it was, they were communicating with someone else. And judging by the intruder's movements, the message was clear: advance. The ranger immediately raised his flashlight, swinging the beam toward the shadow. "Show yourself," he shouted. The figure froze, then ducked behind a tree. "Too late," I muttered under my breath. They were already too close. And then it happened. The extreme moment I had been dreading all day. The massive half-cut pine near the river, already precarious, began to sway. I ran to the window just in time to see it topple with a deafening crash, snapping smaller trees and branches along the way. The sound echoed through the forest like thunder, shaking the ground beneath the cabin. The intruders scattered instantly, slipping into the shadows. The ranger moved quickly, signaling for them to halt, but they disappeared into the darkness. My chest heaved, and the dog barked frantically, circling my legs. I sank to the floor, trying to catch my breath. My cabin had survived, but the forest around it had taken damage. The half-cut pine had been a threat, a weapon in the wrong hands, and now I realized the intruders weren't done. The whistle signaled something bigger. Someone was directing this chaos, someone who wasn't afraid of the forest, the cabin, or me. Hours passed. The wind moaned through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and soil disturbed by the fallen tree. I stayed near the cabin door, flashlight in hand, dog at my side, eyes scanning every shadow. Every creak, every snap of a branch made my heart race. Whoever was out there was patient. They were calculating. They were waiting for me to make a mistake. Then the unexpected happened, a less extreme but critical moment. A light flickered at the edge of the clearing, small and faint. It wasn't a flashlight. It was a signal, a mirror maybe, catching the moonlight. Whoever was out there was trying to communicate, but with whom, and what was the message? I realized it wasn't just about trespassing anymore. This was a test of control. The intruders were measuring my responses, seeing how quickly I could act, how brave I could be. And somehow, they knew I owned the land, even if they hadn't seen the paperwork yet. My mind raced, trying to anticipate their next move. Suddenly, the dog barked loudly, alerting me to movement behind the cabin. I turned, flashlight sweeping the dark corners, and froze. Two figures emerged from the shadows, moving quickly but silently, crouched low, carrying long objects. I couldn't see exactly what they were, but the intent was clear. They were coming toward the cabin. The ranger stepped in front of me, weapon ready, eyes sharp. "Hold your ground, don't move, let them come." I hugged the dog closer, heart pounding. The figures advanced, careful, deliberate. Then one tripped over a root, the sound loud in the still night. The ranger shouted, and the intruders froze, unsure what to do. At that exact moment, I remembered something crucial. The forest wasn't just trees and shadows, it was my land. Every path, every hidden nook, every clearing, I knew it better than anyone else. I realized I had an advantage they didn't expect. I moved slightly, enough to shift my position, showing them that I was aware. The intruders hesitated. One of them made a quick movement toward the cabin, but then paused, uncertainty flashing across his face. And then, the extreme moment that would define the night. A second massive branch, loosened from the storm earlier in the week, fell from a tree directly onto the path where the intruders were advancing. The sound was deafening, splintering wood echoing like gunfire. They scrambled back, startled and disoriented, giving the ranger time to secure the cabin. I felt a surge of relief but also dread. This was far from over. Whoever orchestrated these attacks was still out there, watching from the shadows, planning the next move. And I knew deep down that the forest and my sanctuary was entering the most dangerous night of all. The fallen branch still lay across the path, its jagged edges glowing faintly under the weak moonlight. The forest had gone silent, unnaturally silent. No rustling leaves, no chirping insects, no distant calls of owls. Just a heavy, suffocating stillness that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It felt like the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The ranger moved cautiously along the edge of the clearing, checking the ground for fresh footprints. The dog stayed glued to my side, her ears forward, her body tense. I could tell she sensed something I couldn't, something invisible hiding in the shadows. Her soft growl vibrated through my leg. "Stay close," the ranger whispered. "This is the calm before something big." I swallowed hard and nodded. My cabin had survived the night so far, but the intruders were getting bolder, more coordinated. First the thrown branch, then the toppled tree, and now two figures sneaking behind my home. Each attack was more dangerous than the last. Someone clearly wanted to scare me, push me, intimidate me. But why? What did they hope to get out of all this? For a moment the mood shifted. A less extreme moment settled in. The ranger and I stood on the cabin's small deck, catching our breath as the dog paced between us. The air felt a little lighter. I could hear the distant sound of the river again, trickling softly through the rocks. The wind brushed gently through the trees, restoring some balance. "We should talk," the ranger said, lowering his voice. "Who knew you were coming here this weekend?" "Only Karen," I replied, rubbing my temples. "And maybe a few people from town who saw me picking up supplies. But Karen has been a troublemaker for months. She reported my cabin as illegal before. Maybe she told someone else." The ranger frowned. "This feels organized but not professional. Whoever they are, they're scared of something, or angry." "Angry at what?" I asked. "The forest, my cabin, me." "Maybe your ownership," he said. "People do strange things when they think land they don't own should belong to them." His words sank into my mind like cold water. The intruders didn't know yet, but Karen did. She had always been loud about her opinions. What if she told others that she was planning to take the forest? Or worse, what if someone believed they had a claim to my land? Before I could respond, the dog froze again, tail stiff, ears pointed toward the river. She growled, louder this time, backing toward me slowly. The ranger raised his flashlight and shined it across the clearing, just in time to catch a flicker of movement. A figure darted between the trees, swift as a shadow, then another, and another, 3 silhouettes, each moving with purpose, circling the cabin from different angles. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't random anymore, they were surrounding us. The ranger whispered urgently, "Inside, now." We rushed into the cabin, locking the door behind us. The dog barked wildly, packing from window to window. My heart felt like it was punching my chest. The ranger turned off all the lights. "We need to make it harder for them to see where we are," he said. "Stay low, stay quiet." For a few minutes, there was nothing but silence, the kind that pressed against your ears and made your thoughts louder. The only sound was the dog's rapid breathing and my own heartbeat. Then the whistle came again, but not just once, 3 quick blasts in a row, a new pattern, a new command. My stomach twisted painfully. The ranger tensed. "That's a signal to regroup, they're about to act." I crawled to the nearest window and peeked outside, barely lifting the blinds. My eyes widened. At the far edge of the clearing, a group of intruders gathered, 4 of them now, one holding a crowbar, another with what looked like a rope. a third carrying a heavy object I couldn't identify, and the fourth he was holding a flashlight but keeping it pointed down, careful not to give away their positions. They weren't just trespassing, they were preparing for something, a coordinated strike. Fear surged through me, but so did something else, anger. This was my land, my forest, my home away from home, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me. The ranger crouched beside me. I've already called for backup. They're on the way, but we need to hold out until they arrive. I nodded, gripping the flashlight like a weapon, even though I knew it wouldn't do much. The dog sat beside me now, no longer packing, but watching the forest with sharp, focused eyes. A shadow moved closer, then another. The intruders were inching toward the cabin, using the trees as cover. My breath caught. The ranger whispered, "Get ready, they're coming." And then came the extreme event that ripped the air apart. A Molotov cocktail, its flame tiny but terrifying, arced through the air and smashed against the ground just feet from the porch, bursting into flames that lit up the entire clearing. I gasped. The heat blasted against the cabin wall. The dog barked in fear. The ranger lunged forward, grabbing a fire extinguisher. "They're trying to burn you out," he shouted. My hands shook uncontrollably as flames danced in the grass. The intruders scattered into the shadows again, but I knew they weren't done. The fire was only the beginning. And in that moment, as the flames grew brighter, I knew that Chapter 10, the final chapter, was going to be the most dangerous part of this entire story. The flames from the Molotov cocktail crackled and hissed, licking the edge of the porch, sending sparks into the dry forest floor. My heart raced as the dog yipped and jumped against my legs, fear radiating from her small body. The ranger was already on it, spraying foam from the extinguisher, dousing the fire before it could spread to the cabin walls. The air smelled of smoke and scorched pine, thick and choking, making it hard to think. I clutched the flashlight tightly, my fingers trembling, trying to stay calm. Whoever was out there had escalated their attack to something dangerous, life-threatening. My sanctuary, the forest, the cabin, my refuge, was under siege. But for the first time, I remembered something important. I wasn't defenseless. I owned the forest. Every tree, every path, every hidden nook and cranny belonged to me, and that gave me a power they hadn't anticipated. The ranger stayed close, moving carefully around the cabin perimeter. "We need to see where they are," he said, voice low but firm. "They're organized, but once they realize this land is yours, they'll think twice." I nodded, feeling a spark of courage. The intruders had assumed they could intimidate me, scare me into leaving, or worse, destroy my property. They didn't know they were up against someone who understood every inch of this forest, someone who had the right and the authority to defend it. Outside, shadows shifted. I saw two figures moving through the trees, cautiously stepping over roots and low branches. One was carrying a crowbar, the other a heavy bag. They didn't know I could see them from the upstairs window, where the light from the lamp illuminated their hiding spots just enough. I whispered to the ranger, "They're coming back, both of them." He squinted through the darkness, then nodded. "Hold tight. Backup is on the way, but until they arrive, we'll make sure nothing gets past us." I could feel the dog tense beside me, muscles coiled, sensing the danger. I stroked her fur, whispering, "Stay calm, we're going to be okay." Her ears flicked toward the window, every sense focused on the forest. The intruders were closer now, moving silently, confidently, under the assumption that no one could stop them. One of them reached for a low branch, trying to peer over the cabin deck to see inside. That's when I realized the perfect opportunity. I switched on the flashlight, keeping it aimed at the trees. The beam cut through the darkness like a spotlight. They froze instantly, eyes wide. The sudden illumination startled them. They hadn't expected to be spotted. I could see the fear flicker across their faces. "This land is mine," I shouted, voice strong and unwavering, echoing through the trees. "Every tree, every path, every inch of this forest belongs to me. You have no right to be here." The ranger joined in, his voice carrying authority. "Step back, you're trespassing, turn around and leave." For the first time, I saw hesitation. Their confidence wavered, replaced by uncertainty. They glanced at each other, unsure of what to do next. They had assumed I was alone, vulnerable. They hadn't expected someone to own the forest outright, to command it simply by knowing it was theirs. And then the backup arrived. A sheriff's SUV barreled down the dirt trail, headlights slicing through the night. Officers jumped out, weapons drawn, surrounding the intruders from multiple angles. The sudden arrival amplified the fear in their eyes. Panic set in. The intruders tried to run, but with the forest surrounding them and law enforcement closing in, there was nowhere to hide. The ranger and I stayed inside, watching as the officers moved quickly, securing the trespassers. They dropped their weapons, hands in the air, realizing too late that their plan had failed. I felt a wave of relief, so intense it was almost overwhelming. The dog barked happily, sensing the end of the immediate danger. The forest was quiet again, the only sounds the gentle rustling of leaves and the distant river. My sanctuary had survived. My home, my forest, my refuge, it was still mine. The ranger stepped onto the porch, wiping sweat from his brow. "You did everything right," he said, voice calm now, though his eyes still scanned the trees. "Owning this land gave you power. They didn't know it, but it protected you, and you stayed calm when it mattered most." I nodded, exhausted but proud. "It's more than just property," I said softly. "This forest, its memories, peace, and a promise to my grandfather. I couldn't let anyone take it." He smiled faintly. "That's why they hesitated. They didn't expect someone to care this much." Hours later, after the intruders were taken away, the sheriff's team stayed to ensure the forest was secure. The fallen trees and broken branches were noted for cleanup, but the cabin itself had survived unscathed. I walked outside, dog at my side, and breathed in the crisp night air. The stars reflected faintly on the river, peaceful and serene again. I realized as I looked around that owning something comes with responsibility, not just to protect it physically, but to honor its value, its history, its beauty. The forest had tested me, challenged me, but in the end, it reminded me of why I fought to keep it. That night, sitting on the cabin deck with the dog nestled beside me, I felt a profound sense of peace. The forest was mine, but more importantly, I had learned patience, courage, and the power of knowing your worth. People might try to challenge it, intrude, or scare you, but sometimes strength comes from standing firm, quietly confident in what you own and what you believe in. The ranger stayed until dawn, ensuring there were no more intruders. As the first light of morning filtered through the trees, illuminating the cabin and forest in a golden glow, I smiled, feeling victorious yet humbled. The forest was alive, safe, and still mine. And somewhere deep in the forest, in the shadows where the intruders had once plotted, I knew one thing: no one would underestimate me again. The forest had protected me, and I had protected it. Where are you watching from?